Thank you.
Thank you. So, also to say, this is my first time in Netherlands. I'm based in Sweden, and I'm here only for the conference and to meet all of you, which is amazing for me. So you heard a little bit about myself. Who am I? But I still want to repeat parts of it, that I work as a public interest technologist at SUNET. SUNET is part of the Swedish government. We brought internet a long time ago in Sweden, like the first ever internet provider. We still provide internet, but we also provide scalable and secure infrastructure to rest of the higher education research institutes and places across the country. So every country has similar networks, like I think it's called SurfNet here, and then we have FUNET, SICT, and other groups. I'm also one of the core person in Tor project. I build and release Tor on rpm.torproject.org. That's part of my work and also part of the community team. I write regularly my blogs in kushaldas.in, and you can find all of my contact details there. And as the last part, I'm also a Python programming language code developer, known as CPython, and director in Python Software Foundation. So that brought me here, like today in a Rust conference. This is my first Rust conference, by the way. So I'm here, but what I'm doing here, why? I'll go back a little bit back in my life, 2009-10, which now seems oddly over 10 years. I was working for Red Hat, a small, tiny open source Linux company, as you know. But I was writing a lot of Python code, like for tooling and services, and then I got hit by something which is pretty common. And this, if I remember correctly, that was a web application, and I was using Django back then. It's not Django's fault, it's my code, I know, but that performance was an issue. How to retrieve the data fast enough, how to do all the things I need to do, and showcase. Then in the Python documentation, I found this piece of C code, which the actual part of the C extensions documentation. You can search about it. It talks about how can you create an extension in C programming language. That's good. Can I try that? Will the extension compile? Yes, of course. Will it do what I need at that moment, back in 2009 and 10? By the way, as my background, I did computer science engineering as my bachelor's, but I knew I was always a terrible C programmer, and I am. But I somehow managed to write enough code to do the things required at that moment. It had performance. But with the time, while working on that project, I understood how bad code I have written. As you know, anyone thinking about security or anyone who does enough of testing, you know about different inputs, correct? And how the output should behave. And I learned, luckily not on production, but learned enough number of times while trying to fix my C code. It's like how to get this actually working. Still lucky enough, that was an internal code base, so I didn't have to worry about too many people attacking it with random input. The input was sanitized way before that I had to do at the end. But that was still a big question in my life. It's like how to get it done. Now, after that, again, today, standing here, why am I talking about Python in a Rust conference in front of a group of Rust developers? To start with, you may have heard that Python is slowly becoming, or already became, in major parts, the first language to learn. It's something which helps a lot of people to get things done. Data science is one of such places. The index, we are there on the top language. I still don't know how this works, but it says, yeah. I really don't know how it works, but the more I talk, I find more and more new developers, they are picking up Python as the first language, then learning different things in various places, this is across the world. So Python is important. At the same time, it's us as developers. I think one of the most important things for us is to get things done in a safe, secure way, and for the perfect use cases. I'll not say business cases. A lot of users are not businesses as such. But the use cases we have to solve someone else's problem. A lot of the times, the problems we are solving are not ours. It's someone else's. So we have to make sure we can provide them with that kind of solution, which works. Now, time passed by. I started doing a lot of different things, still writing majority of things in Python. But that question was up on my brain, like, how can I do it better? In between, I found Go also, which was nice. OK, can I use something in Go and write something, use it from Python? Maybe yes, but just after doing one try, it was like, no, I'm not doing it again. I'll write pure Go if I need to. So the question remained in my life. And I'm saying personally from my point of view, every few months or things, let me search if people are doing it in an easier way. I want to do something which not only I can do, but another new developer can come in and try to repeat. So it's not about me. It's more about, like, we have to build up a community, whatever we are trying to achieve. In between, this thing happened. You know, Rust came in. It came in slow in one way, but it came in fast, like things getting rewritten, things like we can see improvement in various places, etc. I can see on internet. I could go to conferences where I could see like people are talking about Rust among themselves, how they are using it, everything. I opened up the examples, and I'm like, OK, maybe I'll try to get back it later. It looked a little bit difficult for my IQ level at that moment. I'm not saying my IQ increased, but I can read better now. So this is my blog post from 2016. I completely forgot how long ago. So I took the screenshot 2 days ago, I think, and then I realized I first tried to write Rust in 2016. And generally, the way I learn about anything is trying to write a tool or something which I can then use. So if you go to the blog post at the very end, you will find I tried to write something which I can use inside of my Mutt, the email client, so that it can help me to find email addresses. I did that with the help of, if I remember correctly, IRC channel from the Rust. I don't even remember the name. I'm in the Discord channels these days, but I somehow managed to do that. And then I didn't write any Rust for next few weeks. Then I tried to come back and realized I can't even read what I wrote. Brain totally destroyed. And I tried and tried. Then I thought, my old question, what if I now try to see that I can write something in Rust and use it in Python? Is there any easy way? I did not search about it at the first place, by the way. I found a project, pio3.rs, where obviously more people than me thought about this, and they are actually better programmers than me. And so and better Rust developers also, and better Python developers. Even though I'm a code developer, I don't know everything about Python. So these people decided, oh, we should fix this problem. And they started writing this project in Rust, along with the tooling required for any normal Python developer to start writing Rust, expose it as an extension module for CPython, and consume from Python. The thing I always wanted. So how that changed the world. So if you ever used Python here, anyone who all used Python, just to see that, raise hands? OK, a lot of you. So you may have heard about this project, tiny little project called cryptography, which almost every one of us are using in some way or other. And then the cryptography authors decided to rewrite the internal parts from C to Rust. There was some excitement, as you can see. This is a screenshot again from the GitHub issue. You can go and read the whole thread, how people reacted and what was the issue. But you can read my friend Christian's comment. Not going to happen. Rust dependency will stay to replace C code with an actual safe language. And that happened. And now all the Python users, almost everyone who is using Python, they will be using the cryptography module one way or other. In my guess, most of them. So they are now already consuming something written in Rust. That brings me to a module. So I'm a heavy open PGP user, GPG, PGP. I wanted to always use it more from my code. There is still a Python module available which uses the GPG binary inside and like executes it and tries to do something. And the author got angry and renamed the package as, I don't remember, I think pretty bad privacy or some really strange name because it keeps breaking all the time as GPG updates. So, and I found a project written in Rust called Sequoia, sequoia-pgp.org. It's a great library written from scratch to do open PGP operations in Rust. So I thought, let me try. This is a perfect use case where I have Python, that's my end goal. I have a perfectly written library in Rust. Let me try to start working on it. So in 2019, like I started working on the actual library. And while I'll now open up the documentation and things, but while doing that, my Rust skills slowly improved. So for most of you, will find like, oh, we will write so many Rust projects and learn. But for me, that Rust project was something which I really wanted to use. This is from the documentation. So if you know Python, you can actually read it. It's almost like English in that way. It's like we create a key store, we get a key, we encrypt with some key, and then we try to decrypt with a password. Sorry for the example password, but yeah, that's in the documentation. And we can do other things, like we can actually verify the Tor browser with the latest release and with this module. I'm showing you still Python code, by the way. I'll get into the Rust right away after this. But while maintaining this library for over 2 years, my skills slowly improved. And I hope you remember about my comment is that I thought Rust is difficult. I was still based in India. Then I moved into Sweden. And for the last 2 months, I am actually every day going to the Swedish school, trying to learn Swedish. And I don't know how many of you learned other languages outside maybe your journal or like nearby languages. It's extremely difficult. Rust is nowhere near. Like it's so amazing compiler, tells me everything about the things I need to fix. That's not the case in a real human communication. We know writing API is difficult, and we should really think about us, and that language is the API or the data we are throwing at each other and trying to make sense. English is not my first language. I'm still trying to learn how to speak or write better. But this happened. So yeah, my thing slowly improved. Now, as I said, I will try to do a couple of live demos, part of my talk. A few of them will be code, and then actually why this is going to change the world, how we see it. Cryptography is one example I talked about. So the Pyo3 authors, they wrote a tool called Maturing. This helps any new Python developer or any Python developer to start a project in Rust with this command. I'm not going to execute it because after that I just saw like if I try to like Maturing build tries to fetch from GitHub and my network doesn't work, so I don't want to do that part. And so this is the structure it creates. It creates all the files required. And it also creates, by default, something called pyproject.yml, which is about the Pythonic way of building things, and this is where we get all the metadata. So this is the default example. It creates a function and exposes it. We're going to expose this as py function, sum as a string, 2 usages, sum it up, and send it back as string. This string is now going to expose in Python as a Python string. And then finally, in the actual module, I'm just adding the function so that the function is actually exposed towards Python side. By the way, from now on, for the rest of my talk, if you have questions, feel free to ask. So Matwin developed. So it did not do anything. It's not actually building, but I just wanted to show this is how we build for development purposes. Python, I'll go up, import RustNL, then you can see some as string. Maybe 42. Yes. So this works. Now, if I look back, again, you will find it maybe very easy and maybe my stupid example. But if I try to see the example code which we had in C, here, the system. So like take a command, execute, send back the status code. I'm not doing enough checkings and putting an expect there, but at least it works. So again, I do Matwin develop, Python, import RustNL, I don't know, det. So the first line is the output from the command. The second one is the 0 is the status execution exit code from the tool. So this was just the start. Like my initial try was only to see if I can replicate what the CPython extension is supposed to do. But from that moment onwards, writing anything in Rust and then having it exposed as Python became extremely easier and easier and easier target. And I have to say, the authors of the toolchains and compiler and everything else in the Rust land is amazing. Like they're spending so much of time and making sure that the experience for anyone new, like I'm writing it for multiple years now, but I'm still counting myself as a new Rust developer. The experience is amazing. You know, how to improve my code slowly in a better way. So I actually do a longer version of this talk. I did a couple of workshops in various PyCons, and I'm doing again one in PyCon Italy in the end of the month. It's 2 hours workshop on how to write those modules, like writing real examples. If I can. Now this example is again random OS is in my GitHub, github.com Kushal Das, but you can check it. But I will just try to see. So we can actually create details here. I'm taking a Python dictionary, which is hash map in our case, inside of the Rust, and now creating a string out of it, returning it back, the add numbers you saw kind of things, then reading a file, example codes which a new Python programmer who is never written any Rust code can read and understand and compile. So that was the goal of writing this, and that works. The more time goes, we see more and more projects getting rewritten in Rust and then consumed inside of Python. But that also enables us to do something even better. As I said, I'm an OpenPGP user. I use heavily these YubiKeys, like one example, one smart cards, which allows us to do OpenPGP operations everywhere. But it's one thing about writing libraries, but the other thing is about having applications which can actually be used by other people. I'll actually demo this code right now, how this looks or works. I hope it will work here. This is the app image of the tool. It's on GitHub. It's all open source code, everything. But the goal is why we are writing these libraries. Why are we talking about? So this application, which will start up now, is actually written in Python using something called PySide, which is the binding to Qt libraries. If you know about Qt, Qt, that's the name. It's a C++ library. It works on desktops and phones also, works in like most of these coffee machines which you see outside. Most probably they have that inside, working. Works on Mac, Linux, Windows, everywhere. And this allows me to write Python code. But now I can use the code I have written in Rust and consume it properly. So as a live demo, I can try to see with typo. RustNL, maybe some example, some password. Creating keys. GPG users here, by the way, GPG and smart card. Okay, I can see a few hands. So you can understand that the way we do right now in command lines and the difference between command line and a desktop app. We did not do the design of the UI. There are proper groups, researchers who actually helped us to build up this UI. And so we can do this, and we need to update the UI. You can see that the screen froze for a function call while it was uploading. And the upload is successful. We have a new key here. I'm not even showing the fingerprints yet, but we can do more things like edit a name of the card. Someone who never used the OpenPGP, like the command line tools, and knows the pain of how much things we have to do, you will not easily understand, like otherwise how much pain it is to do it correctly in one go. But this is the place where languages help us to build tools and technologies for the final end users. Like we are writing this particular project, Tumpa, for like hoping that everyone can use OpenPGP, at least the generation keys and using the smart cards, mainly focused for activists, lawyers, journalists, all of them, so that they can use this. And this now works. You can connect it to any device, and it will have a proper, the secret subkeys on this. But at the same time, these libraries enables us to do more. Like, as I said, I work for SUNET, and at SUNET, we have some very specific needs for, again, I'm showing only my example, Johnny Can Encrypt. And if you know that project name, by the way, if you, like, anyone knows the actual paper? Well, like someone, why Johnny can't encrypt? Search about it. So that was just like, I'm pretty bad in project names, so I thought, let me name my encryption project that. So this is another application which is under our github.com/sunet project. It's called TugPGP. This tool, the goal is that we should be able to create keys securely enough which doesn't touch the disk. The goal, again, we will do all the key operations, but we should not be able to save. The user should not be able to save the key on disk. It should not touch. The moment the operation is done, it's gone from memory and everything. So that's what we do there. It's like, again, you will find it's the same Qt application using Python, Qt, and again, parts of it in Rust. So you can do multiple different things. And I'm just showing my examples, correct? So if I go back, and there is this more examples, which is here. This is, by the way, the PyO3 user guide. Examples, I'm going to increase the font size so that you can read. Can you read it now? So you will find now more, this list is growing over the last 1 year. Anyone use this project called Pydantic? Pydantic 2 is rewritten in Rust. And the author is actually started a new company, if I believe, based on the project. And they are talking about the performance gain by rewriting everything in Rust, still enabling all Python users to consume it. So my goal here, giving this talk to all of you, the Rust developers, is to explain to you why it is important to think while you are developing libraries, that those libraries may not be used only by other Rust developers. Those can be used and will be used, if possible, by people who are from different ecosystems. But we all have to work together. And if I look at this, I'll have one last quote from another friend, Dr. Brett Cannon, who is a Python code developer, also part of the Python Steering Council committee, that way, that he doesn't want to write any more C code outside of CPython. If possible, we'll write it in Rust and consume it directly in Rust, maybe in Python. So that's the future we want. We want people to write better code And Rust enables us to do that, so we want that. But at the same time, for my case, and I know there will be many like me, where we want other Python developers, people who don't have to think, they will just consume the things already written. They should be able to use the exact same libraries. So if you use something called age encryption, so there is a Python, oops, that's my phone. There is a Rust extension, Rust library for that, and I use that to create a Python module. In the same way, there are multiple other things which are like originally written for Rust, including ARTI. It's the new, completely rewritten TOR in Rust. It's not finished yet, but I'm also working to make sure that we have the Python bindings ready for it in future. I'm working on it slowly, but it's all open source, so feel free to join in. But that's basically my talk is about. If you have questions, I would love to hear. If you want to show me the actual code for Johnny Can Encrypt or any of the projects I have, I can open it up and discuss. So I particularly asked for having more time for the talk, a question and answer session, so that we know we can have some discussion. Otherwise, it looks really scary from standing here and seeing everyone is like looking at you like this. So,
thank you. That's absolutely fantastic, Kushal. Thanks a lot. So, with that, I would like to open up the floor for questions. Who has a question? Oh, there we go.
Lucky me, one question
at
least.
Do you think you can throw it? Yeah, somebody's gonna. I'm gonna hit someone. Ah, ooh, that's not bad.
Went pretty okay. Thanks for your talk, and yeah, really appreciate the sentiment of let's make it available to everyone. Let's make it available to Python. But I was kind of wondering, what is your experience with marrying Rust's strong typing with Python's, if it fits, it goes, type of programming?
So that's, as I understand it correctly, how does that fit in between the typed language like Rust and then getting into Python? So the easy answer is, if you have seen, like Python developers are getting more and more excited about having type annotations in our code. We want to, not for runtime, but more about readability so that people can read more, do things better. And I'll show you directly from my own example. How to big? So what we do is we write things like this. This is the typing, what do you call it, annotation details for my module. And I know if I write it instead of in something else, it will work runtime-wise. But we want to make sure that the actual consumers, the human being, they get the correct information and it works. Sometimes it's really difficult because coming from a dynamic language background, I am always happy to just put anything randomly. Everything is object. It will just work in Python land. But then while working with something like Rust, where I have to make sure that I'm sending the correct data type. So, and in my particular, this library in multiple cases where I'm receiving either a string or an object, a Python object, and then before calling the actual Rust code, I make sure that in my Python code, I convert it into the right data type, and then send it across to Rust land, get back the answer.
So for your first example, you had the sum to string, and your function took a usize, but in Python it's just an int.
Yes.
And an int can be anything. How's your experience making that work?
I'm yet to find issues with it. And Pio3 took care of the magic.
That's great to hear.
That's the Pio3 magic, not me. Oh.
There we go. Does somebody else have a question? Oh, no, now it needs to...
Okay. Yay.
Hey. Good throw.
Yeah, so I'm not very familiar with the pipeline, the compilation pipeline of Python, but what I understood from the presentation is you generate a shared object of a sort from the Rust library, and you perform a runtime injection, and you just run whatever is there, right? So
Not injection as such, it's properly gets loaded. So if I see, where is that, where does it go? So just give me a second. Yes, please finish the question. Let me show meanwhile.
The question was if you have some way to integrate the LLVM output from Rust into the compilation pipeline of Python, or it's just some runtime thing?
It's the standard runtime Python extension. So if Python knows this is the path, and it will find out that it's something a Python extension, so it will try to load it. So let me try to find that thing. So that's the file.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's clear.
Thank you. It's not anything fancy. It's just the very basic shared object file because Linux. So nothing fancy at all.
Yeah, that fully answers the question. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So, there's a question on the same. Yes, nice.
Got him. Ruby 3.1 starts having Rust inside C Ruby. Is there Rust coming into Python, into C Python?
So if I remember correctly, there was some group of people tried to write a complete rewrite of Python from Rust, in Rust, from scratch. I think it's called Rust Python or something. Yeah. The C Python itself doesn't have any Rust code inside right now, and maybe not near future, but we will reach there someday, hopefully. Yeah. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I've been contributing to the Ruby version of rewriting it in Rust, and that's an adventure. Yeah.
There are hands just below.
So we're going to do 2 more questions. And I got here one at the front. So
yeah, and I'll be here for the whole day. So feel free to catch me after the talk. I'll come out if you have questions.
So my question is so if you want to distribute the Rust module, how do you handle build a wheel file I saw? But how do you handle do you build it for different Python ABIs?
Correct. So the question is, how do you handle the Python ABIs, which might be different between Python 3.9, 3.10, 3.11 as such and stuff. So the Maturin itself will take care of it, the tool IDEA mode. So let's say on Mac, where I noticed for the first time, was if I have more than one Python installed, while building the wheels, it built for all the Python ABI and taking care of it. And on Linux, it's, if I have a wheel here, here you can see that per Python version, how it's doing. So separate wheels for each one of them. I can build many Linux wheels, which I actually do, and that I publish. But that's a separate task. But again, many Linux wheels is something which I inject shared objects, but for each Python version separately. That's
right. Yep.
I think one last question.
How to do panic-free error handling in PyO2?
In
PyO2. I saw a lot of expect and unwrap, and I wonder if there's other ways, because you avoided that somehow, even though it should be easy. Error handling.
So the way I understood people do, my understanding so far, is handle it proper Rust error handling. That is, check for error or result, and then if I use my actual code, where are the errors? So you can actually create Python exceptions like this using the macros provided by PyO3, and then return those. And I can have implementation for the kind of errors which don't have a corresponding Python exception, and then map out everything so that anything that goes out are, instead of panics, proper Python exception, so that the Python code can handle it. That means you have to write a little bit more extra code to make sure that everything works properly. And you can see that I have multiple errors, just to make sure that it doesn't panic. Perfect. So I'll be available here, and you can still find me on internet. If you have any questions, anything else, that's my Mastodon account, my blog. So thank you for listening to me.
Thanks.